The story begins in 1985 with the introduction of Deva, an ordinary boy who is friends with Varada, who is one of the descendants of the king in the kingdom of Cancer. As a loyal friend, Deva is always ready to defend Varada in any difficulty. Deva went to Varada's half-brother Rudra. Here he stole Varada's nose ring, which is none other than a symbol of honor in the kingdom of Cancer. Therefore, Deva wants to reclaim it in order to restore the honor of his best friend. But Rudra has one condition that is quite heavy, which basically means that if Deva wants to take Varada's ring, that he must defeat a wrestler who is known to be the strongest in the kingdom. Moreover, he had just knocked out all his opponents in the arena. Despite being a child, Deva wasn't daunted at all. Instead, he relied on his brain to make a trap with an electric cable. Then when the fight was about to start, he led the wrestler towards the trap. And what happened was that Deva held the electric cable that caused him and the wrestler to be electrocuted. Seeing Deva's victory, everyone was surprised. They didn't expect that a boy as small as him could overthrow a wrestler who was 3 times his size. As agreed, Rudra finally returned Varada's nose ring. But one day, royal envoys came to finish off Deva and his family. In fact, they also wanted to rape his mother, who was a widow. Luckily, Varada came to stop the messenger's behavior and was willing to sacrifice an honor bracelet to his father's subordinates so as not to disturb Deva's family anymore. For whoever has the bracelet, then he has the right to control one of the territories belonging to the Cancer Kingdom. After the king's messenger was ordered to leave, Varada asked Deva and his mother to leave the Cancer Kingdom so that nothing similar would happen to them. But before leaving, Deva vowed to remain loyal to Varada and would come if he needed help. Seeing this, Varada's assistant said that in the Persian kingdom there was once a man who swore loyalty to the Sultan. Then upon hearing the oath, the Sultan called him by the name Salar. After parting with Varada, Deva and his mother lived a miserable life because they were always hunted by the royal troops. So, inevitably, they always had to move and nomads. On the other hand, Varada could only reminisce about their time together and wondered when he would see him again. 32 years later, there was a hacker who had just gotten important information about a beautiful girl named Adya. Apparently, Adya is traveling from America to India. But at the same time, she was also targeted by officials in the kingdom of Cancer, especially Abu Lama, who is a loyal servant, one of the royal councils. Hearing this information, Abu Lama immediately mobilized 2 of her trusted gangsters to capture Adya alive. On the other hand, Adya's father panicked when he found out that his daughter had gone to India, because 7 years ago she and her family fled to America after being considered traitors by Radha as the current ruling Cancer royal council. Therefore, he was very worried that the child would be eliminated as well. As a result, he contacted his best friend Bilal to pick up and hide Adya before Abu Lama's men caught her. At first, Bilal didn't want to interfere in this matter, but he still had an indebted of honor to Adya's father, so whether he wanted to or not, he had to protect her, even if at life as a cost. Without lingering, Bilal went straight to the airport and swiftly attached explosive devices to every gangster car that was ready there. In addition, he also taken down one of gangster's subordinates so that he could hijack his car. At the same time, the gangsters intercepted the taxi carrying Adya and made the situation very chaotic. Fortunately, Adya was put into a car that had been hijacked by Bilal, so he immediately took her away. Then he activated all the bombs he had installed. Long story short, Bilal finally arrived at a mining town bordering Myanmar. Here, he immediately gave his cell phone to Adya so she could talk to her father. After that, Bilal said that Adya's actions could invite danger. Later that evening, Bilal asked Adya to forge her identity and register as an English teacher at the place. And as it turns out, the principal is Deva's mother. Initially, she doesn't want to accept a foreigner as a teacher, but she wants to give Adya one chance with a pretty heavy condition, which is that when chasing later, Adya must be able to make her students comfortable within 3 days. If she couldn't, then she had to leave on day 4. Before she officially became a teacher, Deva's mother gave advice so that Adya could educate the students well, so that they could grow up to be good children like her son, who is none other than Deva. even though the son only works as a heaver. Elsewhere, Abulama seemed very worried about Radha's condition, who never wanted to eat, because grudge against Adia's father was greater than her hunger. This made her body thin and helpless. However, Abulama says that her time of vengeance will come soon. At the same time, Abulama's gangster deliberately killed his own subordinates. He then reported to the police that his men had been killed by Adia. As a result of his report, the police immediately put the woman on the wanted list. In fact, they also cooperated with the American ambassador so that they could catch her easily. In addition, they also checked CCTV throughout the city and tracked every vehicle that passed on the road. Then, while tracking, one of the hackers asked his boss why Radha wanted to catch Adia. It turns out that apart from wanting revenge on Adia's family, he also wants to bait the most wanted fugitive by the Cancer Kingdom. The next day, Adia officially became an English teacher. However, she was late because her room was locked from the outside by her bad students. Arriving at the school, she was again in trouble because all the children there didn't want to learn and chose to play outside the classroom. So inevitably, Adia had to persuade them to enter class again. But after all the students had gathered, the bell suddenly rang. After school, Adia saw Deva's mother or the principal arguing with one of the parents, and when her patience ran out, she immediately swatted him in public. Seeing this, Adia was very surprised, because he just found out that there were teachers who were that brave. Then there was a school employee who explained that Deva's mother really cared about the children in the mining area. So she set up a school so that the children's future would not be bleak, let alone become hivers like their parents. But when she fought for the children, the residents often tripped her up. So inevitably, he has to be tough. On the other hand, there is a big difference between Deva's attitude and his mother's, because Deva is known as a polite, gentle, and diligent worker. Not only kind, he also often plays with the local children to reminisce about his childhood with Farada. In the evening, Deva returned home late after working in the mines, but strangely, his mother was furious. She does all she can to keep her son not back like in the past, where he was once a brutal, heartless killing machine just in defense of her life. The next day, Adia returned to the classroom, but again, the boys were unruly, making her furious. Seeing the way Adia teaches, the principal immediately stops the lesson and tells her to go to the market to buy a lamp. At the market, Adia was suddenly intercepted by 4 beavers. At the same time, Deva was also there. As a result, he asked the beavers to stop bothering Adia. But instead of leaving, they mocked her. Luckily, a police car passed by the market and made them run away from there. Meanwhile, Deva is still trying to hold back his emotions while gripping an iron pole until it is dented. At a port, Abulama's men were smuggling illegal stuff along with a mafia, and the plan was to send the stuffs through Nepal. But before being sent, all the stuffs were stamped with the Cancer symbol. Not long after, there was a customs officer who suspected the attitude and movements of Abulama's men. But when he saw the symbol, the officer was immediately frightened. In fact, he immediately contacted the governor, police chief, and all his staff so as not to interfere with the delivery of illegal stuffs. That is because Cancer is the most powerful kingdom on the Asian continent. On the other hand, Deva was celebrating a little girl's birthday with a simple cake. But when Deva wanted to cut the cake, there was a boy who accidentally dropped a candle until a small fire broke out there. Seeing the flames and Deva holding a plastic knife, the mother was frightened and immediately grabbed the knife. Elsewhere, Abulama's men spread Adia's photo to all Indians, including those living in mining areas, and anyone who could find her would get a reward. Then not long after, they found Adia, who was hiding there thanks to reports from coolies. Without thinking, the gangsters were ready to arrest him. At the same time, Adia is seen delivering food to Deva on orders from his mother. Unfortunately, when she arrived at the mine, she was arrested by heavers who conspired with the gangsters. Seeing this, Bilal, who was there, tried to persuade Deva to save her, because he knew that the man was a very strong person and could beat them all. However, Deva was just glued to his place, because he had promised his mother not to be brutalized again. But this time, the mother allowed it for Adia's safety, until finally, the lion who had been sleeping woke up again. When saw Diva slaughtering coolies and gangsters, everyone could only be silent and dumbfounded because they had never seen such a great person. Even Aditya was immediately infatuated with his greatness. Even so, Deva's mother had a bad feeling that they were under great threat and trouble. Therefore, she wanted to invite her son to go to a safe and controlled place. In addition, she also requested that Bilal take Aditya away before the gangsters came again. Before leaving, Aditya told why she wanted to go to India. Apparently, she had promised herself to go to the Ganges and scatter her late mother's cremated ashes. But since she couldn't go there, she left the ashes to Deva. Just as things were getting worse, Abulama's men came up with another plan that caught Aditya. They rerouted the illegal shipment from Nepal to the Myanmar border so that they could put Aditya in a truck with a cancer symbol. There was no one would dare to intercept her. At the same time, Aditya's father came in sweaty clothes to ask that his daughter be let go, as she had done nothing wrong. But Abulama said that Radha wanted to kill Aditya first to make her father feel tortured. At that time, the gangsters came to the mining area to kidnap Aditya, and unfortunately Bilal could not move after being surrounded from all sides. Eventually, Aditya was caught and branded with the cancer symbol on her arm. Meanwhile, Deva and his mother had gone quite far. But his mother suddenly asked him to turn around and save Aditya and Bilal, because after all, they are not bad people who deserve to be treated like animals. On the other hand, Aditya, who was already in the truck, asked about the chancery symbol and the reason why she was being hunted by the gangsters. But before answering her, Bilal asked her to hold hands because something very bombastic was about to happen. Sure enough, Deva was back at the mine and ready to save them both. Deva's car has been modified with automatic weapons. Without thinking, he immediately attacked Abulama's men. After destroying the enemy car, Deva broke through their defenses while launching a relentless attack. When the cover of Deva's arm was released, a tattoo of the sacred cancer symbol was revealed, leaving his opponents helpless. In just a moment, he was able to finish off the gangsters and put their reinforcements in fear. While the battle was going on, Radha watched him from the palace, and soon she stood up like a normal person, whereas before she looked like a sick person. It turned out that Radha felt that her plan had succeeded. In essence, she deliberately stamped the royal cancer on Aditya's arm and put her in a truck of goods that had been stamped as well. Because she knew that the only person who dared to attack the cancer logo was Deva, the fugitive she had been looking for. As per the law of the kingdom, anyone who dares to attack the cancer logo must be put to death. It wasn't long before the royal party heard news of Deva's appearance, but it made Farada anxious. Moreover, Deva will soon be sentenced to death. But as a prince, he must obey the king's rules, so inevitably he had to give up the life of his own friend. After the battle was over, Bilal invited Aditya to go to a safer place, and to accompany his journey, he told her about the history of Kansar and the reason why Deva became a royal fugitive. 1,000 years ago, the Kansar region was famous for its robbers who liked to loot villages and cause trouble in various places. At that time, the Kansar region was divided into 3 major tribes, consisting of the Manor, the Anga, and the Kanyar. Over time, these 3 tribes turned the Kansar region into an invincible kingdom. Even in 1747, the British came to colonize Indian soil, but they were unable to conquer the Kansar kingdom. Then when India became independent, the king of Kansar removed his territory from the country's map. Apart from leaving India, he also emphasized that the rules in the country wouldn't apply in Kansar, but the rules in Kansar would apply to all Indian lands. Since then, the underground world has been controlled by the chancellor, and all illegal trade is run by the empire. Even so powerful that the kingdom can also organize Indian elections, then put their people in the government, so that no one dares to disturb their territory. It turns out that the chancellor is India's political oligarchy. Apart from interfering in Indian elections, the Kansar kingdom also had its own election system. Because the territory was founded by various tribes, the appointment of the king had to be done through elections to avoid civil war. But in 1985, their king passed away. By Kansar law, the representative of the Anga tribe was entitled to succeed the throne of the previous king. But unfortunately, the king's son named Rajamanar didn't accept if the throne was not passed down to him. He conspired with the Ganyur tribe to massacre all the descendants of the Anga tribe, including Deva and her mother. Since the massacre, King Manar ascended the throne to become the new king of Kanzar. To maintain his power, he reinforced the military with a very strong army, modern weapons, and a huge wall surrounding the palace. Later, King Manar also appointed 8 chancellors' councils. 5 of them were from the Ganyur tribe, while the other 3 were from his own family, including Radha, who was his first child. Until 2010, Rajamanar wanted to go sightseeing while seeing the city outside the Kanzar. Therefore, he assigned Radha as his temporary replacement. However, one of the council named Varava had a different opinion. He was Radha's husband. He said that Varada also had the right to be on the Chancellor's Council, as he was the king's youngest son. However, King Manar rejected this opinion, because Varada had thrown away his honor bracelet to save Deva. Even so, Bharava tried to convince him that Varada was more deserving of being king than Radha. Because of Bharava's incitement, King Manar called an important meeting before leaving his palace. In the meeting, he wanted to dismiss the council named Ranga, so that Varada could take his place. Reluctantly, Ranga gave up the seat. After the meeting was over, Bharava heated things up by telling Ranga and Rudra that Varada would snatch the king's seat from them. In order not to lose his throne, Ranga and Rudra immediately gathered their strongest troops to attack Varada's territory. Before Raja Manar returned to the palace, they slaughtered all those who supported Varada to become the Kanzar Council. Being outnumbered, Varada was cornered and surrendered in front of Rudra. But when he wanted to be executed, suddenly the sound of a bell saved Varada from death. Because the bell signaled a ceasefire in the entire Kanzar region that must be obeyed. Not accepting, Ranga and Rudra immediately went to the palace and protested to Radha, who rang the bell. As the interim queen, she didn't want a civil war, so the ceasefire was the right decision. However, Rudra invoked his veto as one of the king's sons to call an emergency election. In essence, he wanted to propose the lifting of the ceasefire so that he could finish Varada. As a result, the election date was set and would be held 9 days from the time of submission. After that, all the royal councils began to gather the best troops from various parts of the world, starting from American mercenaries, KGB, to rebel soldiers from Afghanistan. So when the ceasefire was lifted, they could immediately go to war. While others were busy gathering troops, Varada was relaxed and said that he only needed help from one person, who else but Deva. The next day, Varada asked Bilal for help to pick up Deva at his current residence. Long story short, they both got there and immediately visited Deva, who had now turned into a blacksmith. Seeing the arrival of his old friend, he looked very happy and immediately remembered all the memories with him. After releasing the longing, Varada conveyed his purpose, and without hesitation, Deva was ready to do anything for his best friend. He then asked permission from his mother to keep his promise to Varada. Although forced, Deva's mother still allowed him to go, because promises must be kept, especially since Varada had saved his life in the past. Not long after, they finally arrived at the Kanzar. Dashingly, Deva walked through the city gates and everyone immediately focused on him. 7 days before the election, one of the councillors named Narang passed on his post to Vishnu, who was his eldest son. And not long after the inauguration, Rudra sent a message for him to follow his alliance to finish Varada. Since getting the message from Rudra, Vishnu has been looking for trouble with Varada and harassing him all the time. Deva, who was fed up, tried to defend his friend and really wanted to beat Vishnu and his men. But Varada kept him from getting angry because he knew Vishnu was deliberately provoking him, and if his side fought back, then the election could be cancelled. When venting his anger, Varada preferred to get drunk rather than resort to brutal means. He complained that no one was on his side in the palace. Even those closest people undermined his decision when he brought Deva as his protector. On the next day, Vishnu was performing his evil act, where he would select virgin girls in his area to be used as slaves and sacrifices. But this time, he also invited Varada to watch the action, and of course, he wanted to provoke his anger as directed by Rudra. Unable to bear the sight of the girl, Deva decided to act. He then calmed the parents of the girl taken by Vishnu, then provoked the anger of Vishnu's men, until finally the fistfight was inevitable. Seeing Deva's brutality, all the girls who were there immediately gathered around Vishnu while singing a song of resistance. Meanwhile, Farada's men asked their master to stop Deva. However, he let him continue to brutalize and finish Vishnu in a very sadistic way. With Vishnu dead, the girls were freed from Vishnu's immoral behavior. The elders thanked Deva for being a hero for the weak people. It didn't take long for the news of Vishnu's death to spread like wildfire throughout Kansar. This led to the arrest of Deva, Farada, and their members by the royal police. Then on the way to prison, Deva apologized for his careless actions. Meanwhile, the kingdom will continue the election for the ceasefire because it wasn't Farada who killed Vishnu, so legally it cannot cancel the vote. But if Narang takes revenge for his son's death, Farada could be killed and the election system will definitely be disrupted. Hence, the royal party must not let that happen. On the other hand, Ranga persuades Rudra to prevent Narang from taking revenge, because he wanted to kill Farada with his own hands. But Rudra was silent and felt that his plans were ruined because of Deva's presence. At the same time, Narang and his tribe members held a funeral ceremony for Vishnu. Here, he looks very angry and can't wait to finish Farada. But Radha forbids him because it was Deva who killed his son. Then a few days later, Farada and Deva were brought to the Chancery Court, which was attended by all the Chancery Council. But when the court took place, Narang took a sword and wanted to finish Farada. Not just silent, Deva pleaded with Narang to kill him. But Vishnu's father ignored him and preferred to kill Farada. When Narang wanted to slash his sword, Deva suddenly swung the sword towards Narang's hand. After cutting Narang's hand, Deva warned everyone not to disturb Farada again if they didn't want to end up like Narang. Then Deva cut Narang's neck. Since the incident, the council has been terrified. So Deva must return to prison, and this time he will be sentenced to death along with all members of Farada. In prison, Deva apologized for his actions, which again only made matters more complicated. But Farada also apologized for involving him in the kingdom's problems, to the point of putting him in prison. 2 days before the election, Ranga strengthens his coalition with Rudra, and it turns out that all this time he has been conducting experiments to create an army of zombies that thirst for human blood, because he believes the voting results will bring him in a civil war, so these zombies could help him to win the war. The next day, Rudra visited Farada in prison to negotiate with him. He then reminded Farada that he had to choose a war decision over a ceasefire, and if he didn't follow his orders, then he wouldn't hesitate to finish Farada after the vote. Not long after, Radha also came to visit Farada. But unlike Rudra, she told him to vote for a truce, because if not, then the royal party will kill everyone he loves. Long story short, the day of the election arrived, which would be followed by all the nobles of the Kansar. Even King Minar decided to go home to cast his vote. Then when the votes were tied, Farada was called upon to decide the outcome. And unexpectedly, he chose the war option. With that, the ceasefire was officially lifted, and each tribe had to prepare with their respective armies, because the civil war will determine who the next ruler will be. Not accepting the result, Radha mobilized her troops to arrest everyone associated with Farada. At the same time, Farada was taken to Ranga's zombie cage. Then suddenly, Ranga smeared Radha's body with blood, and as a result, the zombies chased him at that time. Elsewhere, Deva will soon be executed along with everyone who has a relationship with Farada. But before his execution, he asks the executioners to sharpen his sword again, because the weapon is not sharp enough to cut off the head. While they were busy sharpening, Deva approached a court shaman, then asked him to make a tattoo that would later be known as the Cancer symbol. After the tattoo was completed, the executioners swung their swords, and Deva immediately managed to avoid the executioner's attack. At the same time, Farada was still struggling with the zombies, but when he was cornered, there was someone who led the zombies with a very pungent smell of blood. It turns out he is Deva, who has just escaped the death penalty. Then with his 2 swords, he finished them off brutally. Afterward, Deva gave the weapon to Farada and invited him to kill together. because the zombie army couldn't defeat the two of them. Ranga also mobilized armed troops riding motorcycles to defeat them both. Seeing that the situation was very chaotic, Rudra went to his uncle and invited him to work together to unite the forces of the Manar tribe, so that they could conquer the entire Kansar region. On the other hand, the remaining Kanyers approached a tribal leader outside the kingdom who had thousands of soldiers ready to die. He also invited the Kanyers to unite and seize the power of the vacillating Kansar. At the end of the story, King Manar caught an intruder who turned out to be a descendant of the Anga tribe. When interrogated, the intruder said that Parava was also a living descendant of Anga. He deliberately married Radha so that he could destroy the kingdom from within by pitting them against each other. He did all this to avenge the massacre of King Manar in 1985. In addition, he was the mastermind who made Deva return to the Kansar region, because Deva was a descendant of the Anga tribal leader who should have become king. Hearing this, Radha immediately mobilized all her troops to fight against the Anga tribe. Alongside this action, the movie ended.